The great ships moved through the darkness like silver ghosts. There were hundreds of them, each one larger than a mountain, their hulls reflecting the light of distant stars. They traveled in perfect formation, never wavering, never breaking rank. Inside these vessels, the Velcaran Dominion prepared for another conquest. Archon Velrys stood on the command platform of the flagship Eternal Harmony. His tall figure was draped in robes that shimmered with colors no human eye could perceive. His head was elongated, smooth, with large eyes that held depths of purple and gold. Like all Velcarans, he possessed no mouth. Speech was unnecessary when minds could touch across the void. Below him, the psychic choir assembled. 300 Velcarans took their positions in the circular chamber, their minds already beginning to link. The air itself seemed to vibrate with unseen energy. Velrys could feel their thoughts merging, becoming one vast consciousness. This was the power that had conquered 10,000 worlds across 50,000 years. The target world appeared on the viewing sphere. It was beautiful, covered in swirling clouds of pink and orange. The native species called it Janara. They were artists, dreamers, a civilization that had spent millennia perfecting music and color. Their cities were works of art, their entire culture built around creating beauty. They had no weapons, no soldiers, no concept of war. They never stood a chance. Velrys gave the mental command. The choir responded instantly. Their combined consciousness reached out across the void, a wave of pure psychic force that traveled faster than light itself. It crashed into Janara like an invisible tsunami, washing over every living mind on the planet. The Janari never knew what happened. One moment they were composing symphonies and painting murals. The next moment their thoughts were no longer their own. The psychic broadcast overwhelmed their consciousness, replacing their individual wills with a single command. Submit. Join the harmony. Become one with the Dominion. Within 3 hours it was over. 8 billion Janari stood motionless in their beautiful cities, waiting for orders from their new masters. They were not dead. They were not even unhappy. The psychic control made them feel peace, contentment, purpose. They believed with absolute certainty that serving the Dominion was their true calling. Velrys watched it all happen with the same feeling he always had during conquests. Nothing. He felt nothing. The other Archons sent thoughts of congratulation through the mental network. Another world brought into harmony, another chaotic species saved from themselves. The Velcaran way spread further across the galaxy. All was as it should be, but Velrys felt hollow. He had led 400 conquests in his lifetime. Every single one had ended the same way. Total victory without a single shot fired. The target species never resisted because they could not resist. The psychic broadcast made resistance impossible. Where was the challenge? Where was the meaning? He kept these thoughts carefully shielded. To question the Dominion was to question harmony itself. Such thoughts were dangerous, possibly heretical. Still, he could not shake the feeling that something was missing, something important. The fleet remained in orbit around Janara for 3 cycles, establishing control structures and integrating the new subjects into the Dominion's vast network. The Janari would continue their artistic pursuits, but now their creations would serve the greater good. Their music would celebrate unity. Their art would depict the glory of submission. On the 4th cycle, new orders arrived from the High Council. The fleet was to proceed to sector designation 7-7-3 Alpha. Long-range scouts had detected a species in the early stages of stellar expansion. They had established primitive colonies on several worlds in their home system and were beginning to develop faster-than-light travel. Perfect timing for integration. The species called themselves humans. Their homeworld was designated Sol 3 in Dominion charts, but they called it Earth. Velrys studied the scout reports as the fleet traveled through the void. The humans were strange. They had no psychic abilities at all, which was unusual but not unheard of. What caught his attention was their history. These creatures spent most of their recorded civilization fighting each other. Wars, conflicts, struggles for dominance. Even now, as they reached for the stars, they remained divided into competing factions. How had such a fractured species even survived long enough to achieve space travel? Most species developed unity before they developed interstellar capabilities. Humans seemed to do everything backward. The journey to human space took 20 cycles. The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, their sensors immediately scanning for targets. The scout reports had been accurate. There were human settlements on multiple worlds and moons, Primitive space stations orbited the gas giants. Small warships patrolled the outer regions. Warships. The humans had actually militarized their space. How quaint. The High Council's orders were clear. Begin with the standard subjugation protocol. Send the psychic broadcast. Integrate the humans into the Dominion. If they possessed any useful technology or resources, catalog it. If not, they would serve as labor for more advanced species. Velrus positioned the fleet in high orbit above the third planet, Earth. It was a blue and green world, covered mostly in water, with white clouds swirling in complex patterns. Scans indicated a population of nearly 9 billion humans, spread across all the major landmasses, technologically primitive but rapidly advancing, genetically diverse, psychically null. The choir assembled once more. This time there were 500 Velkarans, a larger group than usual. The High Council wanted to ensure complete integration on the first attempt. No survivors, no resistance, no errors. Velrus felt the minds linking around him, the familiar sensation of individual consciousness dissolving into collective purpose. The choir's combined power built like a gathering storm, reality itself bending under the weight of so much focused psychic energy. He gave the command. The broadcast launched. A wave of pure mental force capable of overwhelming any organic consciousness in its path. It raced toward Earth at superluminal speeds, invisible to human sensors but unstoppable to human minds. The wave struck the planet. It washed over the 9 billion humans living on the surface. It penetrated their cities, their homes, their minds. And then something impossible happened. Nothing. Velrus felt the psychic broadcast simply vanish. It was like dropping a stone into an infinitely deep well and never hearing it hit bottom. The wave of mental force that should have enslaved 9 billion minds in seconds just disappeared into static. The choir faltered. Confusion rippled through the linked consciousness. This had never happened before. The broadcast always worked. Always. In 50,000 years and 10,000 conquests, it had never failed. Velrus ordered them to try again. The choir reformed, gathered their power, and sent another broadcast. Stronger this time. More focused. The result was the same. The psychic force reached Earth and vanished without effect. On the planet below, the humans continued their daily lives completely unaware that someone had just tried to enslave their entire species. Twice. Emergency communications flooded in from the other ships in the fleet. Every vessel reported the same thing. The broadcasts were not working. Human minds were somehow untouchable. They registered on psychic sensors as living, conscious beings. But when the Velkarans tried to actually connect with those minds, there was nothing there, just noise, static, chaos. It was like trying to grab smoke with their thoughts. Velrus felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Uncertainty. The Dominion's most fundamental power, the ability that had built their empire across half the galaxy, had just failed completely. He reached out to the High Council, broadcasting his report across the vast distances. The response came quickly, but it was not helpful. The Council had no records of any species successfully resisting psychic subjugation. This situation had no precedent. While Velrus tried to understand what was happening, the humans finally noticed the fleet. Their primitive sensor networks had detected the Velkaran ships in orbit. Communication signals began flooding toward the fleet. Radio waves, laser communications, even crude quantum transmissions, all of them carried the same basic message. Identify yourselves, state your intentions, respond immediately. The humans were not cowering in fear. They were demanding answers. Velrus decided to attempt direct communication. He selected one of the stronger signals, originating from a large human military vessel in the outer system. The ship was tiny compared to Velkaran vessels, barely larger than a Dominion shuttle. Scans indicated it carried approximately 200 humans and was armed with primitive kinetic weapons and nuclear devices. The humans still used atomic fission as a weapon. How primitive. He broadcast a simple message in mathematical sequences, then in basic images trying to establish communication. The human ship responded almost immediately with similar mathematical patterns. They were attempting first contact protocols. This was all wrong. First contact was supposed to end with immediate subjugation, not diplomatic communication. The Dominion did not negotiate with species marked for integration. That would imply the target species had a choice. But what else could Velrus do? The psychic broadcast did not work. The entire conquest protocol had failed at step 1. He needed new orders, new strategies. This situation required careful consideration. While he was thinking, one of the younger Archons made a decision without authorization. Frustrated by the humans' continued independence, he ordered his ship to fire a warning shot across the bow of the human vessel. A single plasma bolt set to minimum power, intended to demonstrate Velcaran superiority and encourage submission. The humans interpreted it as an attack. Their response was immediate and violent. The small human warship launched 16 nuclear missiles directly at the Velcaran vessel. Primitive weapons, easy to destroy, but the intent was clear. The humans were fighting back. The Archon's ship defended itself easily, destroying all the missiles with point defense systems. But then more human ships appeared, converging from across the system. They were not fleeing. They were not surrendering. They were attacking. Velrus watched in shock as the situation spiraled out of control. A brief but intense skirmish erupted near one of the gas giant's moons. Human ships fired their crude weapons with surprising effectiveness, working together in coordinated patterns despite having no psychic link. Velcaran ships returned fire, confused by the need to use physical weapons instead of mental domination. Neither side achieved a decisive victory. The humans lost 3 ships. The Velcarans lost 1. But the psychological impact was enormous. For the first time in recorded Dominion history, an enemy had fought back. An enemy had drawn Velcaran blood. Velrus made the hardest decision of his career. He ordered the fleet to withdraw beyond the system's edge. They needed to regroup, rethink, and report this disaster to the High Council. As the great silver ships retreated into the darkness, Velrus stared at the blue and green planet growing smaller on his display. Those strange, chaotic, psychically null humans had done something no other species had accomplished in 50,000 years. They had said no. And for the first time in his long life, Archon Velrus felt something other than emptiness. He felt fear. Not fear of the humans' weapons or their numbers. Fear of what they represented. Fear of the unknown. Fear of change. The fleet jumped to faster than light speed, leaving the Sol system behind. But in the quantum-entangled communications network that connected the entire Dominion, word was already spreading. The species that had conquered 10,000 worlds without resistance had finally encountered something they could not control. Across the galaxy in the ancient halls of the High Council, alarms began to sound. Deep in restricted archives, locked files began to open. Files containing prophecies and warnings from the Dominion's earliest days. Prophecies about a species that would be immune to the Great Harmony. Warnings about the Silent Ones who would bring chaos to order. The High Council began emergency deliberations. The discussion lasted only hours. Their conclusion was unanimous. Humanity was not just a failed conquest. Humanity was an existential threat to everything the Dominion had built. If word spread that psychic domination could be resisted, if other conquered species learned that freedom was possible, the entire empire would collapse. There was only one solution: complete extermination. Every human, every colony, every trace of their existence must be erased from the galaxy. The High Council issued orders to assemble the full armada, not a fleet, not an expedition, the entire military might of the Velcaran Dominion. 100,000 warships drawing crews from across all conquered territories. Enough force to shatter planets and sterilize entire systems. They would return to Sol 3. They would return to Earth. And this time there would be no attempts at subjugation, only annihilation. Humanity had done the impossible. They had resisted the Velcaran Dominion. Now they would learn why no one had ever tried it twice. Captain Elena Vasquez stared at the damage report on her console and tried not to scream. 3 ships lost, 47 crew members dead. And for what? Because some aliens had fired on the mining frigate Prosperity without warning, and humanity had done what it always did when threatened. They had fought back. Now the aliens were gone, vanished as mysteriously as they had appeared. The United Earth Navy was on full alert across the entire system. Every colony, every station, every outpost was preparing for war. And nobody had any idea what they were preparing for. Elena rubbed her eyes. She had been awake for 36 hours, coordinating defensive positions around Titan. Her ship, the destroyer Indomitable, was one of the newer vessels in the fleet. Fast, well-armed, and equipped with the latest sensor systems. Not that any of it had helped against the alien ships. Those vessels had been enormous. The smallest one was 5 times larger than Earth's biggest carrier. They moved with impossible precision, their formations never wavering, and their weapons had destroyed 3 human ships before anyone even understood what was happening. The official story was that this was a first contact situation gone wrong. Some kind of cultural misunderstanding. The aliens had fired a warning shot. Humanity had overreacted, things escalated. Now both sides were probably reassessing the situation. Elena did not believe the official story. She had watched the sensor recordings 24 times. The alien ship had not fired a warning shot. It had fired on the Prosperity with clear hostile intent. If the freighter's captain had not been paranoid enough to keep his shields active in friendly space, that shot would have vaporized his ship instantly. This was not a misunderstanding. This was an attack. And something told Elena that the aliens would be back. She was right. 3 weeks after the first encounter, every sensor station in the outer system lit up simultaneously. Ships were emerging from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Not dozens. Not hundreds, thousands. The initial count was 8,000 vessels, then 10,000, then 20,000. The sensors kept climbing as more ships appeared. By the time the emergence was complete, the count had reached 100,000. 100,000 alien warships had just entered human space. Elena received the emergency transmission in her quarters. She was at her command station 60 seconds later, already issuing orders before the crew had finished scrambling to their posts. All around her, the bridge burst into controlled chaos. The communications officer was pale. "Captain, we're receiving broadcasts from Earth Command. All military vessels are ordered to defensive positions around Earth and Mars. Civilian ships are being ordered to evacuate the outer colonies immediately." Elena looked at the tactical display. The alien fleet was not moving yet. They simply hung in space at the system's edge like a silver storm waiting to break. Between them and Earth were scattered dozens of human colonies. Titan, where Elena's ship was stationed. Europa, Ganymede, Callisto, the asteroid belt settlements. Mars and its terraforming stations. Millions of people, trapped between the alien fleet and Earth. "Belay that order," Elena said quietly. "We're not abandoning anyone." Her executive officer turned to her in shock. "Captain, those are direct orders from Earth Command." We have to protect civilians," Elena interrupted. "That's our job. That's why we're here. I don't care if there's 100,000 alien ships or 1,000,000. We're not leaving those colonies defenseless while we run to Earth." She opened a channel to the other Navy ships in the area, 37 vessels in total. Destroyers, frigates, a handful of cruisers, against 100,000. The odds were laughable. "This is Captain Vasquez to all UEN ships in the Jupiter sector. I know you've all received the recall order. I'm countermanding it. We have 6 million civilians on Titan alone, double that in the belt. We cannot abandon them. I need volunteers to hold the line here while evacuation begins. Anyone who wants to follow Earth Command's orders is free to do so. No judgment. But I'm staying. Who's with me?" For a long moment there was silence. Then one by one the ships responded. All 37 of them. They would stay. They would hold. Elena had never been prouder or more terrified. The alien fleet began moving. Not toward Earth, toward the outer colonies. Their target was clear. They were going to destroy the settlements one by one, methodically eliminating humanity's presence in the outer system before moving on to the inner planets. The evacuation began. Every civilian ship, every transport, every vessel capable of carrying passengers started loading people. The Navy ships formed a defensive perimeter, buying time. Hours, maybe days if they were lucky. The aliens arrived at Titan 18 hours later. The civilian evacuation was barely 40% complete. Elena watched them come. 2,000 ships in the first wave. Massive vessels that dwarfed her destroyer like a whale dwarfs a minnow. She thought about running. She thought about how easy it would be to just activate the faster-than-light drive and disappear. Live to fight another day. Instead, she opened a channel to her crew. "I won't lie to you. We're probably going to die today. These aliens could destroy us without even trying. But 2 million people are still on Titan. Their only chance is if we slow these bastards down. So that's what we're going to do. If anyone wants to take an escape pod, do it now." "I won't stop you." Nobody moved. Elena smiled. "Then let's make them remember us. All weapons free. Target the lead ship. Fire when ready." The Indomitable opened fire with everything it had. Railguns, missiles, laser batteries, all aimed at the largest alien vessel. The human destroyer was like a terrier attacking a bear, too small to seriously threaten but too stubborn to back down. The alien ship's shields absorbed the damage easily, but it had to deploy those shields. It had to acknowledge the attack. It had to respond, and that meant it had to slow down. More human ships joined the attack, 37 vessels against 2,000. They spread out, hitting the aliens from multiple angles, forcing them to respond to threats from every direction. The aliens were more powerful, but the humans were faster, more maneuverable, and absolutely refused to give up. The battle was chaos. Elena had trained for fleet combat, but nothing prepared her for this. The aliens fought with perfect coordination, their ships moving in flawless formations as if controlled by a single mind, but they seemed confused by human tactics. The Navy ships did not move in formations. They improvised, reacted, each captain making their own decisions without waiting for orders. It should have been a disaster. Somehow it worked. The chaotic human tactics were impossible for the aliens to predict. Every time they moved to counter one threat, another appeared from an unexpected direction. 3 human ships were destroyed in the first hour, 5 more in the second, but the evacuation continued. Civilian transports fled toward the inner system, packed with refugees. The Navy bought them time with blood and fire. Elena's ship took a direct hit from an alien plasma weapon. The entire port side exploded. 20 crew members died instantly. The ship listed shields failing, engines barely functional. Elena kept fighting. "Captain, we have to retreat," her executive officer shouted over the sound of alarms. "The ship can't take another hit like that." "Then we don't take another hit," Elena said calmly. She activated the emergency thrusters, spinning the crippled ship in a wild maneuver that no sane captain would attempt. The alien ship that had been targeting them fired where the Indomitable should have been. The shot missed by meters. Elena fired back. Her railgun was still operational. The shot hit the alien ship's shield generator through sheer dumb luck. The shields collapsed for just a moment. It was enough. 3 other human ships saw the opening and concentrated their fire on that exact spot. The alien ship exploded. It was the first confirmed alien kill of the war, the first proof that these massive vessels could be destroyed. The news spread through the human fleet like wildfire. They could be hurt. They could die. The battle intensified. The aliens seemed to become more aggressive, perhaps angered by the loss of one of their own. They tightened their formation, concentrating their fire. The human fleet scattered, refusing to give them easy targets. 12 hours into the battle, the last civilian transport cleared Titan. 2 million people saved. The cost was 23 Navy ships destroyed and thousands of crew members dead. The remaining 14 human vessels retreated toward the inner system. The aliens could have pursued, could have destroyed them easily. Instead, they stopped. They held position near Titan as if waiting for orders. Elena used the time to assess the damage. Her ship was barely holding together. Half the weapons were offline. Life support was failing. They had maybe 6 hours of air left, but they had survived. Somehow, against impossible odds, they had survived. And they had won something more important than a battle. They had proven that humans could fight these aliens, could hurt them, could resist them. News of the battle reached Earth within hours. The mood shifted from panic to grim determination. Yes, the aliens were powerful. Yes, they outnumbered humanity 1,000 to 1. But they could bleed. Scientists across Earth and Mars began analyzing every scrap of data from the battle. Sensor readings, weapon effects, shield frequencies, everything. Somewhere in that data was the key to defeating these invaders. Dr. Marcus Chen was one of those scientists. He was a xenopsychologist, a specialist in alien minds and cultures. He had been preparing for first contact his entire career, imagining what other intelligent species might be like. This was not what he had imagined. Marcus stared at the psychic energy readings from the initial encounter. The aliens had bombarded Earth with some kind of directed mental force. The sensors had barely detected it, but it had happened, twice. 2 massive waves of psychic energy that had washed over the entire planet, and nobody had noticed, not a single human. 9 billion people had been hit with a psychic attack and none of them had felt anything. Marcus began running tests. He gathered volunteers, exposed them to recorded samples of the alien psychic broadcasts. Nothing. The humans felt nothing. The energy passed through their minds like light through glass, leaving no trace. He tested with stronger recordings, amplified samples. Still nothing. It was as if human minds existed on a different frequency than the alien psychic force. They simply could not interact. Marcus realized something terrifying and wonderful. The aliens had not attacked humanity because of resources or territory. They had attacked because their primary weapon had failed. These aliens conquered through psychic domination. They enslaved other species by overwhelming their minds, and humans were immune. He wrote a report and sent it to Earth Command. The response came within an hour. He was ordered to the headquarters of the United Earth Navy immediately. They needed to understand this immunity. If humans were naturally protected from psychic attack, that changed everything. While Marcus was being rushed to Earth, the alien fleet finally moved. They did not head for the inner system as expected. Instead, they spread out across the outer solar system, systematically destroying every human colony and outpost they could find. The asteroid belt settlements, the mining operations on Ganymede, the research stations on Europa. They were not trying to conquer. They were trying to exterminate. The UN fleet fought back desperately. Every ship, every weapon, every trick they knew. They evacuated what civilians they could and died buying time for the others. The aliens were methodical, thorough, and utterly merciless. Mars was next. The Red Planet had 3 billion people living in domed cities and underground habitats. The terraforming project had been humanity's greatest achievement, turning a dead world into something that might one day sustain life naturally. Billions of tons of ice had been brought in from the outer system. Atmosphere was slowly building. In another century, humans would walk on Mars without suits. If they survived that long, the alien fleet arrived in Mars orbit 48 hours after leaving Titan. 100,000 warships surrounded the planet. There was no escape, no evacuation, no hope. Elena and the survivors of the outer system battle had limped to Mars, their ships held together with emergency repairs and prayers. They prepared to make their last stand. Marcus Chen arrived on Mars the same day, transported on a fast courier ship. He met with Elena and the other surviving captains in an emergency conference. He explained his theory about psychic immunity. He showed them the data. He told them what he believed. The aliens had conquered thousands of worlds. They had built an empire across the galaxy. All of it was based on psychic domination, and humans were immune to it. That made humanity an existential threat to everything the aliens had built. They're not here to conquer us, Marcus said quietly. They're here to destroy us completely. Because if word gets out that psychic domination can be resisted, their entire empire collapses. Every species they've enslaved would rebel. Elena stared at him. So we're going to die because we're immune to mind control? Yes, Marcus said, unless we can find a way to turn that immunity into a weapon. Elena was about to ask how that was even possible when every alarm on Mars went off at once. The alien fleet was moving. They were beginning their bombardment. The battle for Mars had begun. The battle for humanity's survival had begun. And deep in Earth's laboratories, Marcus Chen began working on the most desperate plan in human history. A plan that would either save the galaxy or drive it insane. He just needed more time that the UN fleet was buying with their lives. The battle for Mars lasted 17 days. 17 days of constant combat, of ships burning in orbit, of domed cities cracking under orbital bombardment. 17 days of humanity refusing to die quietly. Captain Elena Vasquez had stopped counting how many times her ship should have been destroyed. The Indomitable was more scrap than spacecraft now, held together by emergency welds and the sheer stubborn will of her crew. Half the systems were offline. They had oxygen for maybe 12 more hours. Food had run out 3 days ago, but they were still fighting. The Velcaran fleet surrounded Mars completely. 100,000 ships against humanity's few thousand. The aliens had numbers, technology, and firepower. They should have won in hours. Instead, they were bogged down in a grinding battle of attrition that made no strategic sense. The humans would not stop. They would not surrender. Every time the Velcarans destroyed a human ship, 2 more would swoop in from unexpected angles. Damaged vessels would ram alien ships rather than retreat. Escape pods would detonate near alien hulls, sacrificing themselves for minimal damage that added up over time. It was insane. It was wasteful. It should not have been working. But humanity was still fighting. Archon Velrus commanded the assault from his flagship. He watched the tactical displays with growing confusion and something he rarely felt: frustration. The humans were losing. Their casualties were catastrophic. Their strategy was non-existent. Individual captains made their own decisions without coordination. It was chaos, yet somehow that chaos was effective. Every time Velrus predicted human movements, they did something unexpected. Every time he concentrated firepower on a sector, the humans simply avoided that sector. They had no formation to break, no strategy to counter, no command structure to disrupt. They were just fighting, each ship acting independently, and it was impossible to predict. Worse, the humans were learning. In the first days, Velcaran shields easily deflected human weapons. But the humans adapted. They found weak points. They concentrated fire. They used nuclear weapons in creative ways, detonating them to disable shields before following up with railgun fire. And they were not fighting alone anymore. Mars itself had become a weapon. The ground-based defense systems poured fire into orbit. Missile silos that were supposed to be for defense against asteroids now launched attacks on Velcaran ships. Even civilian facilities were fighting back with improvised weapons. Velrus had conquered 400 worlds. He had never seen anything like this. On Mars, in a bunker 3 kilometers underground, Dr. Marcus Chen was not watching the battle. He was too busy with his work. Around him, dozens of scientists and engineers labored over equipment that had been assembled in desperate haste. The theory was sound. The math worked. But they had never tested it. They were building a psychic broadcast station, one that would transmit human thought patterns across space. Marcus had studied the Velcaran psychic broadcasts for weeks. He understood now why they did not affect humans. Human consciousness was fundamentally different from every other species the Velcarans had encountered. Most species had ordered hierarchical minds, clear thoughts, organized consciousness. The Velcaran psychic control could grip those minds, dominate them, control them. Human minds were chaos, contradictory thoughts existing simultaneously. Conscious and subconscious in constant conflict. Emotions and logic battling for dominance. Every human mind was essentially arguing with itself constantly. The Velcaran broadcasts could not grip that chaos. It was like trying to hold water in your fists, but that chaos could be weaponized. If they could broadcast human thought patterns across space, they could disrupt Velcaran psychic control. Every enslaved species in the galaxy might be freed, or they might all go insane. There was no way to know without testing it. The equipment was almost ready. Marcus just needed more time. Time that the UN fleet was running out of. Elena received the transmission from Earth Command in the middle of a desperate maneuver. Her ship had just barely dodged a plasma blast that would have vaporized them. The message was simple and direct. All ships, this is Earth Command. We need 12 more hours. Repeat 12 hours. Whatever you're doing up there, keep doing it for 12 more hours. Earth is depending on you. Elena wanted to laugh. 12 hours. They probably had 12 minutes before the Velcarans overwhelmed their position. But she had promised to hold the line. She had promised her crew that their deaths would mean something. She opened a channel to every human ship in the sector. This is Vasquez. Command needs 12 hours. We're going to give them 12 hours. I don't care if we have to ram every alien ship in orbit. We're going to give them the time they need. The responses came back. Exhausted voices. Determined voices. Voices of people who knew they were dead but refused to quit. Let's make it count, Elena said. The human fleet changed tactics. Instead of trying to destroy the alien ships, they focused on disruption. Ramming attacks, suicide runs, anything to keep the Velcarans off balance and away from Mars. It was wasteful and desperate, and it was working. Velrus watched in horror as a human destroyer, its engines failing and hull breached in a dozen places, accelerated directly at his flagship. The human ship was already dead. The crew inside was breathing vacuum. But someone had rigged the engines to keep firing, and the dead ship was now a missile aimed at the heart of the Velcaran fleet. Velrus ordered evasive maneuvers. His massive flagship turned with painful slowness. The human destroyer clipped their port side, the collision tearing a 100-meter gash in the Velcaran hull. The human ship exploded seconds later, taking 2 smaller Velcaran vessels with it. Velrus felt something crack inside him. These humans were dying. Their cause was hopeless. Their fleet was destroyed. Their world was doomed. And yet they would not stop fighting. Would not accept the inevitable. They chose to die rather than submit. For the first time in his long life, Velrus felt respect for an enemy. He was not alone. Throughout the Velcaran fleet, other commanders were experiencing similar thoughts. The constant exposure to human resistance, to human sacrifice, was affecting them. The Velcaran psychic network that connected all their minds was carrying something new. Individual thoughts, personal reactions. Doubt, the Dominion's greatest strength, was becoming a vulnerability. The psychic link that made them so coordinated also meant that every Velcaran was exposed to the chaos of human resistance, and that chaos was infectious. A junior officer named Kaith felt it most strongly. He had been monitoring human communications throughout the battle, listening to their radio chatter, hearing their voices. They were terrified. They knew they were dying, but they still made jokes. They still encouraged each other. They still hoped. Kaith had never hoped for anything. Hope required the ability to want something different from what the Dominion commanded. Hope required individual desire. Hope required freedom. He wanted to understand these humans. He wanted to know how they could be so afraid and so brave at the same time. He wanted to experience what they experienced. The thought was heresy. Kaith knew it, but he could not stop thinking it. On Mars, the 12 hours were almost up. Marcus Chen stood before the psychic broadcast station and tried to steady his hands. The device was ready. The theory was sound. But once he activated it, there was no going back. If it worked, they might free billions of enslaved beings across the galaxy. If it failed, they might drive those same beings insane. There was no middle ground. Elena's voice came over the communication system. "Dr. Chen, I don't know what you're building down there, but you need to use it now. We can't hold them much longer. We're out of ships, out of time. Whatever you're going to do, do it." Marcus looked at his team. They all knew the risks. They all nodded. It was time. He activated the broadcast. The station hummed to life. Power flowed through carefully designed psychic amplifiers. Human thought patterns recorded from thousands of volunteers began transmitting across space. But not as organized signals, as pure chaotic human consciousness. The broadcast reached the Velcaran fleet first. Every Velcaran in orbit around Mars suddenly experienced something impossible. They felt individual thoughts, personal reactions, contradictory emotions. Their perfectly ordered consciousness was invaded by chaos. For most, it was overwhelming. Their minds recoiled, trying to restore order, but some, like Kaith, opened themselves to it. For the first time in their lives, they experienced what it meant to think independently. The broadcast continued spreading, faster than light, riding on the same psychic frequencies the Velcarans used for their control network. It reached the Dominion's other fleets, then the conquered worlds, then the core territories. Across 10,000 planets, enslaved beings began to wake up. The Jannari, who had been conquered just months ago, suddenly realized that the beautiful harmony they had been feeling was a lie. Their thoughts were their own again. The rage was immediate and terrible. On 100 worlds, revolutions began. Billions of beings who had been psychically enslaved for decades or centuries suddenly remembered who they had been. They remembered their lost cultures, their lost freedom, their lost lives. The Velcaran Dominion began to collapse. In orbit around Mars, the alien fleet was in chaos. Some ships maintained their attack, their crews fighting through the mental disruption. Others halted completely, their crews overwhelmed by the sudden experience of individual thought. A few ships actually turned on each other as disagreements erupted among commanders who had never disagreed before. Elena saw the opening. She ordered all remaining human ships to concentrate fire on the command vessels. The Velcaran coordination was broken. Now was the time to strike. The battle turned, not because humanity had superior technology or numbers, but because the Velcarans were too busy experiencing an existential crisis to fight effectively. Archon Velrus felt his carefully ordered mind fragmenting. Contradictory thoughts bloomed like weeds. Doubt, fear, curiosity, anger. Emotions he had suppressed for centuries all came flooding back at once. The perfect harmony of the collective consciousness was shattering, and part of him was glad. He realized something profound. The Dominion had not saved the galaxy. They had imprisoned it, and these chaotic, violent, impossible humans had just set everyone free. Velrus made a decision, an individual decision, made without consulting the collective. He ordered his ship to cease fire. Then he broadcast a message to the entire fleet. "This is Archon Velrus. I am ordering a ceasefire. We have been wrong. We must reconsider everything. All ships withdraw from Mars immediately." Some ships obeyed. Others did not. The Velcaran fleet began to split. those experiencing the awakening versus those clinging to the old ways. The Supreme Archon Thalos, commanding from the core territories light years away, saw what was happening. The human broadcast had not affected him as strongly. He had prepared, shielded his mind, maintained order through sheer willpower. He saw the rebellion spreading, saw the Dominion crumbling, saw 50,000 years of civilization collapsing. Thalos issued new orders. Every ship loyal to the old ways was to regroup. Every commander who still believed in the Dominion's mission was to rally. They would crush this rebellion. They would destroy humanity. They would restore order, even if they had to burn half the galaxy to do it. The Velcaran Civil War had begun. Elena watched as the alien fleet tore itself apart. Some ships were retreating. Others were fighting each other. A few were just drifting, their crews apparently unable to function. "What the hell did you do, Dr. Chen?" she whispered. Marcus Chen emerged from his bunker for the first time in weeks. He looked up at the sky, at the burning ships in orbit, at the chaos they had unleashed. "I set them free," he said quietly. "Now we have to deal with the consequences." Mars was saved. Earth was saved, but the galaxy was burning. Humanity had won a battle by starting a war that spanned 10,000 worlds. A war between freedom and control, between chaos and order, between those who wanted to think for themselves and those who could not imagine life without the collective. And in the middle of it all, one species stood alone. The species that had accidentally liberated billions. The species that was immune to psychic control. The species that refused to submit. Humanity. The question now was whether the galaxy would thank them or destroy them for what they had done. The galaxy was burning, and humanity was watching it happen in real time. Every telescope, every sensor array, every deep space observation post detected the same thing. Across thousands of light years, civilizations that had been silent for millennia were suddenly screaming. Radio transmissions, energy signatures, the unmistakable signs of warfare on a scale humans could barely comprehend. Dr. Marcus Chen had not slept in 5 days. He stood in the observation center on Mars, watching the data pour in. His psychic broadcast had worked far better than he had hoped, and far worse than he had feared. 10,000 worlds were in open rebellion against the Velcaran Dominion. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were suddenly free, and they were angry. The Jannari civilization, artists and dreamers who had never known war, were tearing apart the Velcaran outposts on their world with their bare hands. The crystalline Jantari, enslaved for 2,000 years, were using their natural resonance abilities to shatter Velcaran ships from the inside out. The Cormac, a warrior species that had been forced into pacifism through psychic control, had remembered their ancient battle traditions and were hunting down every Velcaran they could find. Marcus had freed billions of beings. He had also plunged the galaxy into chaos. Captain Elena Vasquez found him staring at a display showing the Jannari homeworld. Fires were visible from orbit. The beautiful cities were burning. "You can't blame yourself," Elena said quietly. "I can and I do," Marcus replied. "I told myself we were liberating them. I didn't think about what would happen after liberation. Revolution, revenge, civil wars within civil wars as different factions fight over what comes next. You gave them a choice. That's more than they had before, did I? Or did I just replace one kind of prison with another? Look at them, Elena. Some of these species have been enslaved for so long they don't know how to function without psychic guidance. They're lost, confused, and some of them are destroying themselves because they can't handle freedom." Elena put a hand on his shoulder. "Then we help them. We teach them. That's what comes next." "How?" "We're one species. We don't even have faster-than-light communication. By the time we could reach most of these worlds, the chaos will have already killed billions." Elena did not have an answer for that. Nobody did. The Velcaran Dominion was fracturing into 3 main factions. The Loyalists, led by Supreme Archon Thalos, believed the old ways could be restored. They saw the human broadcast as a temporary setback. With enough force, enough willpower, order could be reimposed. The Reformers, led by Archon Velrus, believed the Dominion had to change. They accepted that psychic slavery was wrong, but thought the Empire could be rebuilt on different principles. Cooperation instead of control, unity through choice rather than compulsion, and then there were the lost ones, Velcarans who had been so overwhelmed by the experience of individual consciousness that they could no longer function. They drifted through space in their ships, unable to make decisions, paralyzed by the sudden weight of free will. Velrus tried to reach out to as many of them as he could. His ship traveled to the lost ones, attempting to teach them how to think independently. It was not easy. Most Velcarans had lived their entire lives as part of a collective consciousness. Being alone in their own minds was terrifying. He found Kaith on a drifting cruiser near the Jupiter system. The young officer was sitting in his command chair, staring at nothing. The rest of his crew had fled in escape pods, unable to cope. Kaith had stayed, but he was not functional. Velrus approached him carefully. "Kaith, I know this is difficult, but you must adapt. You must learn to be yourself." Kaith's voice was hollow. "Who is myself? I have never been myself. I have always been we. Now there is only I, and I do not know what that means. It means you make your own choices. You decide your own path, but what if I choose wrong? What if my decisions lead to disaster? In the collective, the weight was shared. Now it is all mine. How do you bear it?" Velrus sat beside him. "Humans do it every moment of every day. They live with doubt, with the possibility of being wrong, with the weight of their own choices, and they survive. We can learn from them. You want us to become like humans? Chaotic and contradictory? I want us to be free. If that means chaos, then so be it. Chaos is better than slavery." Kaith looked at him for a long moment. "You truly believe that?" "I do now." Slowly, Kaith stood. "Then teach me. Teach me how to be free." Velrus began working with the Lost Ones, creating what he called cognitive sanctuaries, places where Velcarans and other freed species could learn to function independently. It was slow work. Many failed, unable to adapt, but some succeeded. They learned to make decisions, to have opinions, to disagree with each other without losing their sense of self. It was the beginning of something new. While Velrus worked to save his people, Supreme Archon Thalos was gathering his forces. The Loyalist fleet numbered 30,000 ships, not as large as the original Armada, but still the largest military force in the known galaxy. His goal was simple: destroy humanity completely, then restore order to the conquered worlds. He approached Earth's system from multiple directions, planning to blockade the entire solar system. No escape, no mercy. Humanity would be erased, and with them the chaos they represented. But Thalos had made a critical mistake. He assumed the freed species would remain neutral or even support the restoration of order. After all, many of them were struggling with freedom. Surely they would welcome a return to peaceful subjugation. He was wrong. When the Loyalist fleet began moving toward human space, something unexpected happened. Ships began arriving from liberated worlds. Gennari vessels, beautiful and fragile but armed with weapons they had built in desperate haste. Gentari crystal ships that could disrupt Velcaran psychic networks. Cormac warships designed by a species that understood violence in ways the Velcarans never had. They came to defend humanity. The species that had freed them. The species that had shown them resistance was possible. Earth's defense coordinator, Admiral Chen Lei, Marcus's cousin, watched the sensor readings in disbelief. Hundreds of alien ships were entering the solar system. He prepared to order an evacuation, assuming this was another invasion. Then the aliens started broadcasting messages. Friendly messages. Messages of alliance. "This is the Gennari Pride Fleet. We stand with humanity." Gentari Resonance Group acknowledging, "We will not let your sacrifice be in vain." Cormac battle clans ready for war. "We remember what it means to be free." Admiral Chen Lei opened a channel to all incoming ships. "This is United Earth Navy Command. We appreciate your arrival, but you don't have to fight our battles. We freed you from the Velcarans. You don't owe us anything." The Gennari commander responded first. "We owe you everything. You gave us back our minds, our art, our dreams. If that is not worth fighting for, nothing is." A coalition was forming, not an empire, not a dominion, an alliance of free species, bound by choice rather than compulsion. Elena Vasquez, promoted to admiral after the Battle of Mars, was given command of the combined fleet. It was the strangest fleet ever assembled. Human ships with their chaotic tactics. Gennari vessels that moved like dancing sculptures. Gentari crystal constructs that were barely recognizable as ships. Cormac warships that looked designed for ramming. She gathered all the commanders for a conference. The communication was difficult. Humans used radio. Gennari used light patterns. Gentari used harmonic frequencies. Cormac just shouted really loud. But somehow they made it work. We have 3 days before the Velcarin Loyalist fleet arrives, Elena told them. They outnumber us 3-1. They have better technology, better coordination, better everything. Our only advantage is that we choose to be here. They're fighting because they're ordered to. We're fighting because we want to. That has to count for something. The Cormac commander growled agreement. We fought the Velcarins for 2 centuries before they enslaved us. We know their weaknesses. They expect order. Give them chaos, the Gentry representative chimed musically. Our resonance can disrupt their psychic links, if we can get close enough. The Gennari commander spoke softly. We are not warriors. Our ships are fragile, but we will not hide. We will not run. We remember slavery. We will not return to it. Elena felt something she had not felt in months. Hope. Real hope. Then let's show these bastards what a galaxy of free beings can do. The Loyalist fleet arrived exactly when expected. Thalos positioned his ships in a massive sphere around Earth, preparing to tighten the noose. He expected scattered resistance. He expected chaos, he got it. But not the kind he expected. The Allied fleet did not fight like an organized military. They fought like a swarm of angry insects, each unit attacking independently but somehow supporting each other. Human ships darted in for hit-and-run attacks. Gennari vessels used their maneuverability to draw fire away from more vulnerable ships. Gentary crystals flew into Velcaran formations, disrupting their psychic coordination. Cormac warships just charged straight at the enemy, roaring ancient battle cries across every frequency. It should not have worked. It worked. Thyalis watched his perfect formations dissolve into confused melees. His ships fought well, but they were designed for organized warfare. This chaos was impossible to counter. Every time he adapted to one tactic, the enemy switched to something completely different. And then Velrus arrived with the Reformer fleet, 5,000 ships that had once served the Dominion but now fought for its reformation. They entered the battle on humanity's side. Thalos felt his carefully constructed plans collapse. He was facing not just humans, but a coalition of freed species and rebel Velcarins. The galaxy itself had turned against the old ways. He made a desperate decision. If he could not restore the Dominion, he would at least eliminate the source of the chaos. He prepared the Harmony weapon, a device that could blanket an entire planet with psychic energy. It had never been used before because it was considered too dangerous. It could enslave every mind on a world permanently, turning living beings into empty puppets. Thyalis aimed it at Earth. Elena saw the energy building on the Loyalist flagship. The sensors could not identify the weapon exactly, but the power readings were enormous. Whatever it was, it would devastate Earth. Her ship, the newly built Indomitable II, was the closest vessel to Thalos' flagship. But her weapons could not penetrate those shields. Not in time. She had one option. All crew, this is the captain. Evacuate immediately. Get to the escape pods. That's an order. Her executive officer protested. Captain, what are you doing? My job, now go. That's an order. She waited until the evacuation was complete. Then she locked down the helm controls, overrode the safety systems, and pointed the ship directly at Thalos' flagship. For humanity, she said quietly. For the galaxy. For everyone who chooses to be free. She engaged maximum thrust. The Indomitable II accelerated toward the Velcarin flagship like a spear thrown by an angry god. Thalos saw it coming and tried to evade, but his ship was too large, too slow. The Harmony weapon was still charging, all power diverted to it. Elena's ship impacted the shield generators at relativistic speed. The shields collapsed. The momentum carried the destroyer directly into the flagship's hull, punching through layers of armor like paper. The Harmony weapon exploded while still charging. The psychic energy release was catastrophic, but it was contained within Thalos' own ship. Every Velcarin on board felt 50,000 years of psychic control compress into a single instant. Their minds simply ceased to function. Supreme Archon Thalos died still believing in order, still believing in the Dominion, still believing that freedom was chaos and chaos was death. He never understood that some things are worth dying for. Elena ejected from her ship 3 seconds before impact. The explosion threw her escape pod tumbling through space. She watched the Loyalist flagship tear itself apart, taking with it the last hope of restoring the old empire. The Loyalist fleet, seeing their supreme commander dead and their cause lost, began to surrender. The battle for Earth was over. The battle for the galaxy's future was just beginning. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Earth. 5 years since the galaxy had awakened. 5 years since everything changed. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood at the observation window of Unity Station, watching ships arrive from across the galaxy. The station orbited Earth at a stable point between the planet and the moon. It had been built as a symbol, a place where all the freed species could meet as equals. No psychic domination, no empires. Just beings talking to each other, arguing with each other, learning to coexist. It was messy. It was chaotic. It was beautiful. The Galactic Assembly was in session, 10,000 species. Most of them still learning how to function independently, all trying to build something new from the ashes of the Velcaran Dominion. The debates were endless. The disagreements were constant. Democracy, it turned out, was loud and frustrating and gloriously inefficient. The humans loved it. They had been doing this for centuries. Elena's role had changed. She was no longer a ship captain or even a fleet commander. She was humanity's primary ambassador to the Assembly. Some days she missed the simplicity of combat. Battle had been straightforward. Politics was infinitely more complicated. A familiar presence approached. Velrus, no longer an Archon, just Velrus. He had changed more than most Velcarans. 5 years of individual consciousness had transformed him. His mental patterns were still different from human, but there was a warmth there now. A personality. A self. The Jannari are proposing another motion about psychic technology, Velrus said, his thoughts translating to speech through a device he wore. They want it banned completely. The Jantari disagree. They believe psychic abilities can be used ethically. What do you think? Elena asked. Velrus was quiet for a moment. I think fear is making them both inflexible. The Jannari remember slavery and want to destroy anything that could enslave them again. The Jantari see power and want to harness it responsibly. Both are right. Both are wrong. Welcome to democracy. Everyone is partially right and partially wrong, and we have to find the compromise that makes everyone equally unhappy. Humans have a strange definition of success. We also have a saying, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. We'll figure it out eventually. They stood together watching the ships arrive, Jannari vessels that now carried defensive weapons, beautiful but no longer helpless. Jantari crystals that pulsed with gentle harmonics, sharing music instead of warfare. Cormac warships that escorted trade vessels, protecting commerce instead of conquering worlds. And scattered among them, human ships, smaller than most, more fragile but present. Humanity had not become the dominant species in this new galaxy. They had become something more important, the example, the proof that freedom was possible. Dr. Marcus Chen had found his calling in the aftermath. The Institute for Psychic Recovery occupied an entire moon of Mars. Thousands of beings came there to learn how to function independently. Species that had been enslaved for millennia needed help adjusting to freedom. Some adapted quickly, others struggled for years. Marcus walked through the recovery center, checking on patients. A Velcaran named Sayath was learning to make decisions without consulting a collective. It had taken 3 years, but she could now choose what to eat for breakfast without experiencing existential panic. Small victories. A Jannari artist named Quileth had finally created his first truly independent work of art. No psychic guidance. No external influence. Just his own vision translated into light and sound. He wept when it was complete. Marcus wept with him. The hardest cases were the Velcaran lost ones. Being so accustomed to collective consciousness that individual thought was physically painful. Some had chosen to be euthanized rather than live alone in their own minds. Marcus could not blame them. He could only try to help those who wanted to adapt. One of his success stories entered the office. Keith, who had been paralyzed by freedom 5 years ago, now worked as a counselor helping other Velcarans adjust. He had chosen a human name, Keith. He found the simpler sound comforting. Dr. Chen, the new arrivals are settling in, Keith reported, but we have a problem. The Drakkar refugees are resisting therapy. They say they want to go back to being enslaved. Marcus sighed. The Drakkar were a species that had been integrated into the Dominion for over 10,000 years. Many of them had been born into slavery. It was all they knew. Freedom terrified them more than captivity. I'll talk to them, Marcus said. But Keith, we can't force them to be free. That would make us no better than the Dominion. So what do? We offer them a choice. Real choice. If some of them genuinely want to live in structured communities with limited autonomy, We help them build that. As long as it's voluntary, as long as they can leave if they want. Freedom includes the freedom to choose security over chaos. Keith considered this. That seems contradictory. Welcome to being human. We're full of contradictions. You'll get used to it. Across the galaxy, the cognitive sanctuaries that Velrys had established were growing. Thousands of locations where beings could learn independence at their own pace. Some sanctuaries were strict, with rigid schedules and clear rules helping those who needed structure. Others were loose and chaotic for beings who thrived on unpredictability. The key was choice. Always choice, not everyone adapted. Some species fractured into civil wars, unable to agree on what should come after the Dominion. The Cormac split into 7 different factions, each claiming to represent the true warrior tradition. The Quellan collapsed into anarchy, their civilization destroyed by the sudden absence of psychic guidance. Humanity helped where it could. Medical supplies, engineering assistance, diplomatic mediation, but they could not save everyone. The galaxy was learning a hard truth. Freedom came with responsibility, and not everyone was ready for that burden. The memorial on Earth grew constantly. Names added every day. Humans who had died in the war, aliens who had died in the awakening, Velkarans who had died unable to adapt, beings who had chosen death over either slavery or freedom. Elena visited it whenever she returned to Earth. She found her own name there, on a special section. The Indomitable Memorial. Every crew member who had served on her ships, every person who had died buying time for Dr. Chen's broadcast. She traced the names with her fingers. Jenkins, who had made terrible jokes even as the ship was dying around him. Rodriguez, who had kept the engines running through 3 direct hits. Ananya, who had been 22 years old and had saved an entire compartment by manually sealing a hull breach before the vacuum took her. "I hope it was worth it," Elena whispered. "I hope what we built is worth what you paid." A human child approached her, maybe 7 years old, with a school group. "Are you Admiral Vasquez? The one from the stories?" "I am," Elena confirmed. "Did you really crash your ship into the bad guys' spaceship?" "I ejected first. But yes, basically. That's so cool. I want to be a ship captain when I grow up. Just like you." Elena smiled, but there was sadness in it. "Then promise me something. Promise me you'll only fight when you have to. War isn't glorious. It's terrible. We fought because we had no choice. You're growing up in a galaxy where you might have choices. Make good ones." The child nodded seriously, then ran back to his group. Elena watched him go, a human child growing up in a galaxy of 10,000 species, learning alien languages in school, making friends with Jannari and Jantari, and maybe even young Velkarans. Growing up free, that was what they had fought for. That child's freedom to choose. The Galactic Assembly finally reached a compromise on psychic technology. Limited research allowed, but strict regulations. No broadcast systems that could affect beings without consent. No weapons designed for mental domination. Independent oversight boards with representatives from multiple species. It was not a perfect solution, but it was a solution they had all agreed on. That was what mattered. Velrys invited Elena to a ceremony on what had once been the Velkaran homeworld. The Dominion's heart. Now it was just a world like any other. The massive psychic amplification towers that had coordinated the Empire were being dismantled. It was symbolic, a physical representation of the old ways ending. They stood together watching the demolition. Enormous towers that had stood for 50,000 years crashing down in clouds of dust. Each one that fell sent a cheer through the crowd. Velkarans, humans, Jannari, Cormac, dozens of other species, all celebrating the same thing, the end of an empire. The beginning of something new. Do you ever regret it? Elena asked Velrys. Giving up the certainty? The harmony? The perfect order? Velrys looked at her with those deep purple and gold eyes. Every day I struggle with doubt. Every day I make decisions that might be wrong. Every day I experience loneliness, fear, confusion. He paused, and I would not go back for anything. Because I also experience joy, pride, curiosity, love. Things I never knew existed when I was part of the collective. Your species taught us something we had forgotten. What's that? That the most beautiful sound in the universe is the sound of someone saying no. Because if you can say no, you can also say yes. And when you say yes, it means something. It is real, it is chosen. It is yours. Elena felt tears forming. We lost so many people teaching that lesson. and they saved billions in return. Perhaps trillions when you count the generations yet to come who will be born free. The cost was terrible, but the alternative was worse. They stood in silence watching the towers fall. Around them the celebration continued. Music from a dozen species blended together, not the enforced harmony of the Dominion, but the chaotic beauty of free beings choosing to create together. A young Velcaran approached Elena nervously. "Admiral Vasquez, I wanted to thank you. My parent was part of the Lost Ones. The Institute helped them adapt. They are alive because of what you and Dr. Chen created." "What's your name?" Elena asked. "Vela, I am studying human history. I want to understand how your species survived with so much chaos in your minds." Elena laughed. "When you figure it out, let me know. We've been trying to understand ourselves for thousands of years. But that is the beauty of it, yes? The eternal struggle, the constant questioning. You never stop trying to understand. Never stop seeking. Never stop growing. I suppose that's one way to look at it." Vela smiled, an expression she had learned from watching humans. "Thank you for showing us that struggle is not something to be eliminated. It is something to be embraced. Without struggle, there is no growth. Without chaos, there is no creativity. Without freedom, there is no meaning." The young Velcaran left, and Elena turned back to the demolition. The last tower was falling now. The final symbol of the Dominion's absolute control. It crashed down in a spectacular cloud of debris. The crowd cheered. Beings from 10,000 worlds celebrating together, not because they were controlled, because they chose to celebrate. Elena thought about the long journey, the desperate battles, the terrible losses, the impossible victories. Humanity had stumbled into a galactic conflict by accident, simply by existing, by being immune to control, by refusing to submit. And in refusing to submit, they had shown the galaxy that submission was not inevitable, that empires could fall, that freedom was possible. It was not perfect. The galaxy was still struggling. Conflicts erupted constantly. Some species were thriving, others were failing. Democracy was messy and slow and frustrating, but it was theirs, all of theirs, freely chosen, freely built, freely maintained. Velrus spoke quietly beside her. "What comes next for humanity, Admiral?" Elena looked up at the stars. Thousands of them, each one a sun, each sun potentially home to countless worlds and countless beings, all of them now free to chart their own destinies. "We keep exploring," she said. "We keep learning. We keep helping where we can, and we keep being ourselves. Chaotic, contradictory, stubborn humanity, because that's what saved the galaxy. Not our weapons, not our technology, just our refusal to be anything other than free. And if you encounter another empire, another species that tries to dominate through force," Elena's smile was fierce, "then we teach them the same lesson we taught the Velcarans. Freedom is contagious. Resistance is possible. And some species, when you try to conquer them, will say no. We'll fight back. We'll die rather than submit. And that will be enough? It will have to be. Because that's all we have. That's all we've ever had. The stubborn, ridiculous, absolutely human belief that we get to choose our own path. Even if that path is difficult. Even if it hurts. Even if it costs everything." She looked at Velrus. "You understand that now, don't you? After 5 years of being free?" "I do," Velrus said softly. "And I am grateful. For the chaos. For the doubt. For the struggle. For all of it." They stood together, a human and a Velcaran, watching the last remnants of an empire fall. Around them, the galaxy celebrated. Not perfectly. Not quietly. Not in harmony. But freely. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Somewhere in the vastness of space, a human child was being born on a colony world. A Janari artist was painting a sunrise no one had ever seen before. A Velcaran philosopher was writing about the beauty of uncertainty. A Gentari musician was composing a song about hope. All of them free. All of them choosing their own paths. All of them living in a galaxy that humanity had accidentally liberated by simply refusing to bow. Elena touched her hand to the memorial stone one last time. "We did it," she whispered to the names of the dead. "It wasn't easy. It cost everything. But we did it. The galaxy is free. And across 10,000 worlds, 10,000 species were learning the same lesson. That the greatest power in the universe is not the ability to control others. It is the ability to say no, and having said no, to say yes, to freedom, to growth, To struggle in chaos and contradiction and all the messy, beautiful complexity of conscious beings choosing their own destinies. The Velcaran Dominion had conquered worlds without resistance for 50,000 years. Then silence fell across the stars, and into that silence humanity spoke a single word. No. It had been enough to change everything.